And that's why a lot of women are naturally amazing at sales, because for whatever reason, you can say societal pressures and, how we're raised differently and stuff, but they're more aware of what everybody's feeling in the room and how to make everybody feel better. Something that they're like thinking about all the time. So it translates really well to sales because the other person feels like it's a safe space, like a nurturing space. So
Right.
that, at least with my approach, which is like mainstream sales, I would say you naturally have to be comfortable with being aggressive and like
Mm-hmm.
kind of condescending. And if you're not naturally like that, then you're not going to do very well at sales with mainstream methods. For my methods, the more naturally empathetic and curious you are, the better you'll do. And the fact that you were asking people questions since, 15 years old, just interviewing people, shows that you're like naturally just very, very curious.
Welcome to Reach. This is a show for podcasters who are not only trying to grow an amazing show, but they actually want to make money. I'm excited to share with you the secrets that I've learned along the way, as well as introduce you to some amazing guests who are going to really help you take your show to the next level. I'm your host, Brunson Smith. Let's dive in.
Whenever I would hire for sales teams, if they had cold calling or door-to-door experience, it was a huge benefit because I would hire for these high-ticket coaching and courses online that they had inbound leads. And so if somebody had done door-to-door or cold calling, that was cake for them. If somebody had not done door-to-door or cold calling, the amount of complaints and reasons that things didn't move forward that you would hear from the salespeople was like staggering. Like, you don't even know. Like, this is so easy. They filled
Do
out
you think
a
it was
form.
partly like dealing with rejection and stuff?
I think
like
it
the
was
psychological side of it?
Yeah, that's part of it. Like the resilience that cold calling and door-to-door build. You don't take it so personally. Like, so in my approach to sales, when resistance happens, it's about getting curious. So you don't take it personally and you don't, quote unquote, overcome objections, because when you overcome objections, it feels like you're dismissing and invalidating somebody's concerns, which is a terrible feeling. You're just like, oh, that's not a concern. Don't worry. And nobody really even believes that because it's what they expect you to say. So I think that if you haven't been rejected a bunch, it's very easy to take that personally, like that there's any sort of resistance, and then just
Right.
sort of like torpedo yourself and have a bunch of reasons like
They
these
hate
people
me as
aren't
a person.
serious. And
Yeah.
like it's the leads, they're low quality. And it's like, no, you just, I mean, after you cold called and gone door to door enough, you have found ways to play with that resistance, right? To explore within it and figure out what's going on. Like, what is the resistance? And is this something that is valid or not? And that does translate well to other forms of sales conversations, because you're not just like, oh God, they're saying that they don't like something and they hate me and it's because this person sucks. It's not me. And like, that's like the dialogue going on in people's heads a lot whenever that is happening in a sales conversation.
No, well, totally. And it's funny how, from my perspective, it's also been, you can not even just like play with resistance, but totally like flip that energy right around to make it work for you. You've got people that are yelling at you right out the gate. And that's a funny one I learned too. I mean, and I don't know how this probably doesn't translate very well to the digital marketing space, but I had one time a guy just started yelling at me. And I was like, all right, I've heard about mirroring effort. And I just started yelling right back at him. Like in his home, straight up stood up, and I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, I have never been so disrespected. And I went off and I was like, I will leave if you refuse to like honor my time and like the sacrifice that I'm making. Like, I'm walking right out that door. And the guy's like, whoa, like, we don't need to like freak out. And I had that deal signed in 20 minutes after that. Yeah. $100,000 sale, done. And it was just like, so things like that. It was like learning that people being angry at you or any of those strong emotions is like, oh, that's positive. And that's what I train these people now. I say, if someone is even yelling at you, that's engagement. If they're being apathetic, that's the worst. If they just truly don't give a crap, like that's almost the toughest thing to overcome because you can't really fix apathy. But if someone's being emotional, it's like, oh, that's just like redirect those emotions to a healthy place. Because emotional people, like that means that there's something, you're hitting a chord in some way, and that means that there's a problem that's not being solved in some way, so find the path. So anyways, kind of a funny thing. So for you, it was like you liked working with the door-to-door salespeople then.
If they had that experience, it translated well. What you're talking about would not, because if somebody is yelling at you, that's like nightmare client vibes. So the fact that
Right.
you didn't have to
Exactly.
go on and continue working with that person, like whatever. But if you're going to continue working with that person, you don't want anyone who's like disrespecting you like that. But what is interesting about what you're saying is, and this is why also I liked hiring door to door or cold calling experienced people, is that there were so many instances to just try different stuff. You just had like never ending opportunities to, does this work? Does that work? Without it having really any negative consequence. And so you kind of are able to hone in your style and what works for you more, and understanding what people's body language and verbal cues mean. And those things definitely all translate very well.
Do you find that you like run into a pickle at all because so much of it's online? I mean, if you're on a phone call, I mean, for me, I leaned in so heavily when someone would do the lean back and fold their arms. It's like, okay, either they're really thinking or they're just really not having it, And so I could always lean into that. It seems like maybe you're trying to process this. Seems like maybe, I kind of going that route. And I feel like it's so tough. Like, I don't know. And that's where online stuff is. It just seems so foreign to me. I'm like, how do you sell without being able to like gauge the energy of the room and see what their body language is doing and their feet? I mean, I don't know if I'm sure you've probably experienced it to some degree, but the feet to me are like the greatest telltale. Someone's tapping their foot like crazy, but their face is like they're just a sphinx, like from the waist up, they're just so serious.
Yeah.
And their foot is just like, like thumper. And like, oh, they are just stressed out of their mind right now. And I would end up just like, okay, let's go walk around the house. And we go walk around the house and go, I'd make up some excuse why we'd go do that. And all of a sudden they come back down and they just chill out and they could listen. It was just, so anyways, I don't know how it stresses me out to think about selling online because I'm going, I just don't know how to gauge the energy of the room. And I don't know how to feel those emotions. So I don't know. That's been my
You would
thing.
still be able to, yeah, you would still be able to do it, but it would be like, you can get a lot of verbal cues like tone and pauses and cadence and stuff like that. You would be able to pick up on like, something's coming up for you. Like you would still be able to do the same thing. Yeah. And then with Zoom, you can see a lot of facial expressions, body movement and gestures. So it would probably still apply. I love that you were like, let's go walk around the house. So you could give somebody a moment to like relax. That intuition for where somebody's at would definitely translate. And you can't walk around a house, but you can have an honest conversation about what's coming for them, because your intuition is so tuned in to what someone's experiencing.
Do you feel like how much of, okay, this is kind of a random question, but how much of people being a great salesman from your perspective has to do with natural talent and how much has to do with training? Like if you were to throw a percentage on that, what would you label it as?
That's a really cool question. So I don't think you have to have talent in the way that most people would think sales talent, which is like the gift of gab, right?
Yeah.
Like this person's just smooth and just like says things in a way that sounds good. So you don't really need that, but you need to be a good human. If your nature is like you're a good person that actually cares about people, you can be fantastic at sales. If you don't give a shit about people, it's really hard. So like instead of natural talent, I think it's like, what is your natural level of empathy and curiosity? If your natural level of empathy and curiosity is high, then it's very easy for you to be very good at sales. And that's why a lot of women are naturally amazing at sales, because for whatever reason, you can say societal pressures and, how we're raised differently and stuff, but they're more aware of what everybody's feeling in the room and how to make everybody feel better. something that they're like thinking about all the time. So it translates really well to sales because the other person feels like it's a safe space, like a nurturing space. So
Right.
that, at least with my approach, which is like mainstream sales, you have to be, I would say you naturally have to be comfortable with being aggressive and like
Mm-hmm.
kind of condescending. And if you're not naturally like that, then you're not going to do very well at sales with mainstream methods. For my methods, the more naturally empathetic and curious you are, the better you'll do. And the fact that you were asking people questions since, 15 years old, just interviewing people, shows that you're like naturally just very, very curious.
Yeah. I think I appreciate that quite a bit. I would say that in direct sales, especially, not always, but the majority of them did really well if they already had the gift of the gab. It just helped so much because you had to be so quick at thinking on your feet about how to just sometimes just change the subject or just start a conversation out of absolutely nothing. But I would say, again, it's a different type of sale, whereas this thing has more to do with an actual relationship, right? It needs to be like deep trust that's fostered over time and continues over time because you don't really just want to just turn and burn, right? You want long-term, recurring revenue and things like that. So that is
Yeah.
comforting. So maybe a 90-10. If, okay, assuming I guess that
Like,
if 10% was just kindness, then
I would say like, uh, I have tried to work with people who don't naturally have empathy and curiosity, and it's a very difficult thing to teach.
why
So yeah, I
curiosity?
guess
Just an
90.
ability to ask good questions or,
The ability to hear something that someone says and to be like, what about this? Like, what's missing from that information? The ability to hear the question behind the question,
yeah.
to the ability to hear what they're not saying, you know? So if somebody says something like, wow, this looks like a lot, you would ask,
And you just blow past it.
yeah, which people do all the time, or they just try to
Right.
convince, like they just miss these cues where like if you're a naturally curious person, you're going to be like, well, what do you mean? Like, it's
Yeah.
like a lot of tech, it's a lot of material, it's a lot of hours. Like, what is it? So some people just, I don't know why, but they don't think like that. They are, well, the reason is that they have their own agenda in mind. They're like, what can I do to close this person? That's the only thought on it. And you're
Right.
right. In direct sales, the gift of gab definitely helps because you almost have to immediately engage someone and entertain them almost
Totally.
to get them
Totally.
to stay there. So in
Yeah.
other types of sales, it's just like it's about, do you have a need that I can solve? And they're consenting to it in a way that direct sales is, there's not a lot of consent there at first. You have to like generate the
100%.
consent. So yeah, it's really different. Like if you go buy something from somebody and you like sign up to buy something, you as the buyer, what do you like? Do you like somebody who's like asking you questions and listening? Or do you like somebody who's got the gift of gab?
Exactly. Yeah. And you want to be, and especially if you have a problem in mind, there's nothing worse than someone who's talking your ear off and just trying to like, hey, buddy, old pal. And I think that maybe you agree with this. I feel like consumers are evolving too. Like what used to work even, and I've heard both sides of this and I can see both arguments, but I think I lean this way. And I was like, oh, like sales principles are timeless. And I'm like, I totally agree. But I see ads now that I know my grandma would click on. And I go, that's an ad. And I just blow past it on my Instagram. And my grandma's sharing with me all the time, like, oh, look at this cool post. I said, my grandma, that's an ad. Like, trying to get you to buy something. Well, how do you know? I'm like, it says promoted in light gray letters above that Instagram reel. Oh, but like, and it's just like, we've evolved to recognize when anyone is trying to sell us something. And so the smooth talking salesman, that was a thing of the past. It worked, I think, for a while. And then we evolved to a different thing. And now it's sometimes the guy that's too nice and is like too interested in like, why do you care? Like, no one cares as much about my stamp collection. Why do you care so much? Like, what are you trying to get from me? And I think now it's
Oh,
like people just want to be heard and listened to, like with empathy. At least if so.
Well, and to your point, I think it depends on like the sales setting, but generally speaking, yeah, everybody just wants to be seen and heard and feel like you have their best interests in mind instead of just like, can I get the sale and how can I get the money? So people are becoming more savvy than ever in trying to identify, is this somebody that just wants the sale and my money? And how
Hmm.
can you determine that faster? You know, like if somebody's not asking questions and listening to you and doesn't have empathy, that's usually a pretty big red flag that like this person doesn't have my best interest in. The other thing is that there is such a diversity of people in decision making positions. It used to just be white men. And I'm wondering, Brunson, when you were going door to door, did you find if people had like, if they were different genders, if they had different backgrounds, would they respond differently to the same tactic?
So much so that it began to like affect a lot of my preconceived notions about people. And I've never stereotyped in my life really until I did direct sales. But it was so consistent often.
Yeah.
A black man answers the door, boom, I shift it. Everything instantly. Whole different sales
Yeah.
approach because they just won't care about certain things. Indian man answers the door. It's all business. And he's going to try to get the lowest number 99% of the time. And I think
Oh
a lot
my
of people look at
God.
that and I've
Yeah.
talked to people, they're like, oh, that seems racist. I'm like, I'm not saying this is good or bad.
Cultural.
I'm saying it's so consistent. I'd have to be psychotic to not change my pitch the second I see that a man's Indian or the second I see that a man's white or black or whatever, any demographic. And if it's an old lady and she answers the door like, hello, I go, hi, I'm Brunson. How are you doing? And if Carl answers the door and his biceps are bigger than like half of my body, I'm going to walk up and hit him with the strongest handshake I can muster in my small little frame. Like, it's just different. Like, you just have to play the field. And so it's like, I think you're
Yeah.
spot on, right? Like, that's, yeah. I know some people frown upon, they go like, oh, like everyone's the same. Like, there's some general things, but there are some strong differences in how you approach a sale based on certain demographics. So anyway, sorry, that was
Totally.
a long answer to that idea, but yes, I agree with that heartily.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, it makes sense, right? It's a different cultural background. So if they're
Yeah,
an Indian man who's from India, like in India, everything is about negotiating and
right.
in getting the lowest price. That's normal where they are. So if you think about an older lady who's like a boomer, you know, her experience is going to be like her context for the conversation is going to be very different. You know, she was had to wear pantyhose at the office and, you know, sexual harassment was a normal day. Like, wasn't
Right.
anything to report about. So when you think about all that context, when you see somebody, it absolutely makes sense that it affects how they receive and perceive information. And so
100%.
the timeless sales strategy is getting curious and having empathy. I think no matter what your background, that coming with the intention to actually understand if what you offer is a good fit for somebody in their situation is the best strategy that's going to work across all types of people. And also knowing yourself. I mean, so the way that you know, the people that I focus on with my approach are people selling their own services. So you don't
Mm,
want everyone. You don't want anyone who has a credit card. You have very specific criteria. So if you don't want to work with this guy with the huge biceps that's like going to pretend like, you know, if we're stereotyping, I mean, you can't really stereotype this based on, but let's say that he was just like kind of
extremely
a
aggressive,
meathead.
over the top macho.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
super aggressive, like maybe pretty demanding. You can be like, this is not a fit. It's not a fit for
Yeah.
me. And that's okay. And you should find the other aggressive meathead guy who's going to, you know, give you these huge inspirational, like, oh, talks before whatever.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
so
Exactly.
it's just about like finding your right fit. Whereas like in your door to door sales experience, it's about volume, not quality. It's just
Yeah.
who can I get to say yes? So much translates, but and it needs to be modified. And I think that like your experience is a great testament to how different approaches are needed Do you think that like that one approach would make a difference if people just came instead of this like psychological manipulation? I feel like every mainstream sales strategy like is how can I psychologically trick the other person?
Totally. Yeah. Well, I have a question on this as well. So this is, now this might seem to be on the same thread, but I'm curious what your opinion is on this. Have you ever read The Challenger Sale?
No.
I don't know. I forget the name. It's Matthew something that wrote it. He did a huge study on the most successful salespeople in America post 2008. And that's kind of where some of this idea came from. He was like, it's changed. Like the landscape changed during 2008 drastically. Like our whole economy shifted so much that even sales tactics work differently. And I don't remember all the personality types. I think there was 5 of them, but he did, I mean, it was an enormous amount of study they did on this. And it was like, oh, there's the hard worker, the relationship builder, the service provider. There's another one. And then the challenger. And they did this whole study, spoiler alert, that's the title of the book. The challenger came out on top, like with a huge margin. And he said everyone was like, oh, it's like whoever works the hardest and just grinds. And he's like, no, because when 2008 hit, it was like, I don't care if you outwork everybody. What was interesting was, again, he said it's an evolved psychology of how we perceive sales. And so what it was is that the challenger approach is essentially this, where you come to someone and you say, let me help you reframe the landscape of what we're talking about. I mean, in my case, if I'm trying to sell someone, well, I mean, I'll use an example of podcasting services, right? What I'm doing is saying, hey, listen, this is how you perceive podcasting and what it should do. You want to be Joe Rogan. You want to get 1 million followers. That doesn't work. That works for Joe Rogan. Let me tell you why that won't work for you. You won't beat him. He's got 20 years on you, right? So I'm helping them understand the landscape and saying, but here's maybe what you actually do want. You want 5,000 raving fans who listen to your podcast, and that's it. We don't want more than that. We want our people, our little tribe, because those are the ones you can actually monetize. And they go, oh, okay, so I thought podcasting was about how many views can I get? I'm like, it's about quality views and about making sure your podcast is in the right place with the right people and how to talk to them in a way that's effective so they really trust you and they really want to just buy your stuff. And again, so like, I've taken that person and said, okay, I've given you a paradigm shift on the landscape. Now, here's what I do. I help people not build a giant list. I help them get their 5,000 raving, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, so you're the one to be asking about this. Well, what would I do? And I go, okay. And you switch to consulting mode. And that's kind of the idea of the challenger sale, was that you're there to educate, right? Not so much like, hey, buddy, old pal, heard your daughter, she broke her arm, right? Is she doing better now? And that's like relationship building. He said those guys, they didn't do well in the 2008 recession because when money was tight, they didn't say, oh, but Jim called about my daughter's broken arm. It didn't matter because Joe over here said, hey, I know you think this is how cars work. Let me reframe why you should choose this dealership and not that dealership. Let me educate you on behind the curtain of how dealerships work and how these fees work. And also they're like, oh, I'm an expert. And this dealership's the best because you essentially like help them understand the landscape. Anyways, it's a whole thing. But based on that, do you feel like that works for what the digital sales world is? That vibe with you? What's kind of your synopsis there?
Yeah. So a lot of times, and you heard me talk about this, I think, in the talk at Capshovians Live, you can't educate and sell in the same call. It's too much. It's going to delay the sales process and leave the person often saying, let me think about it. Maybe it's a lot to process. So really, it is so important for them to have that mindset shift and pre-frame, and doing that before the call is going to make it so that instead in the call, you can just talk about what you do specific to their situation. So you would be able to say, a lot of people think, like beforehand, some people think that a podcast is about having as many followers as possible. That's not me. And that's actually not how you're going to monetize. You're going to monetize by having people who want your stuff. And that is me. So you would say that beforehand so that they could cancel the call if they want millions of followers, because that's not you.
Right.
They can go find somebody else. So it's definitely the same type of approach but instead it's sort of saying there's nothing wrong with that if that's what you want. It just depends on what.
I see.
Kind of thing.
Are you big on two-touch? Or do you do a one-touch closing?
To have 2 calls or 1 call?
Yeah. What if you found, I know it's a probably very specific situation, but do you find generally that with the kind of people you're consulting on digital sales, is it more common to see success with two calls or just one?
It totally depends. Usually, just one call is going to be more successful unless there's like a
Hmm,
really lengthy educational process or something like that, or like the
I
leads
see.
coming in are super cold. Sometimes a two-call process can help with that. Usually, you want to send them the information that's going to get them in a better space before the first call. And if there's anything wrong with having to follow up. There's nothing wrong with that at all. It's, but like building in another call, if you cannot do that, it's definitely better for everybody because it's less time and just empower them with information that benefits them in other formats besides a verbal conversation,
Yeah.
basically.
Okay. So like
So
you're
like
proving you're an expert, but you don't always have to do that with a phone call.
listen to this podcast episode, watch this short video,
Mm,
here are some common misconceptions and how we do things differently. All that. I created a sales process and built a sales team, sold a program that showed people how to create passive income by renting website, which basically means that
mm,
they would like pick a tiny town in the US and like rank for plumbing in the town and then sell a plumber all the leads.
yeah.
Uh, it's kind of a complex idea. So we did have two calls for that and a video in between that broke down what exactly it was by showing like a search, like
Yeah.
screen recording and saying, hey, look, I'm typing in plumbing in, Bozeman, Montana. See these people that come up? Who are you going to click on? You're going to click on this one. These are ads. You're going to click on this one. That's who you're going to be. You're going to have that
Yeah.
site and you're going to sell it. So, like you had to sort of, but it happened in between the two calls because the first call had to be like, do you have this much time? Are you willing to do stuff? How are your technical skills? Okay, cool.
Hmm.
Let's have a second call. Here's the process broken down. And like, so it was very specific to that situation because also the audience coming in was clueless,
Right.
never done anything before. So there's so many variables involved. Generally, I would say if you can avoid it, I would only have one.
Okay.
Especially
And
like
that's just to
a lot
keep
of
things
people are like,
simple.
yeah, because they don't want to spend a bunch of time doing it either, the buyer. Like when I work with someone, I really want to make sure that it's streamlined. And part of that streamlining is making sure that people have a certain mindset and are at a certain place when you talk to them. And it's for their benefit too. It's not just for the seller's benefit. Like, ew, I don't want to talk. I don't want to waste my time with you. It's like, do you like wasting time, Mr. Like, or Mrs. Buyer? You want to know beforehand if this is going to be worth the time you're about to invest in it. And so sometimes people
Yeah.
will book like a follow-up call. They're like, well, let's just book a follow-up call. And it's basically just for someone to say yes or no. People ghost that call
Yeah.
all the time. It means absolutely nothing.
Right. Because
If
really they're
anything,
just procrastinating the discomfort of
of saying
asking
no.
for
So
the
they'd
sale.
rather just,
Yeah.
well, no, they ask for the sale and the person's like, let me think about it. Well, let's just book a follow-up
Oh, I
call,
see. Yeah. Yeah.
so that we can talk about it more, answer any questions. And
Right.
the buyer
Hmm.
just goes.
Yeah.
So instead, you kind of want to have like maybe some type of incentive that has a timing around, like where you can reach out
Yeah.
and say, do you need an extension on this incentive? Like you get an extra month or whatever if
Yeah.
you move forward in the next however much time. There's a bad way that people do it that's like, you get $5,000 off if you sign up right. And that is a fast way to burn everybody.
Yeah. Well,
Have
and
you
yeah,
heard
you
of
create a culture of,
it?
well, and it was the same thing. Like and everyone is different, but in even my own closing experience, I had a lot of guys that would do that. I'm like, no, I don't want to create a culture of throw a fit and I'll pay you money, or be difficult and I'll like pay you for it. You know what I mean? Instead, it's like, hey,
Yes.
is there some way that like, like throwing on bonuses was different. Like, hey, I'll throw in this free thing. And for some reason it felt different, but like when you write them, it feels like you're writing them a check or you're diminishing the value of your actual product. I don't know. Something about it just felt like I do not want to create that kind of relationship that's based on me slashing my prices. You know what I mean? It just doesn't make sense. So
Yeah. that translates very well to like long-term relationship sales, because you're right. They believe that the value of what you offer is the value that they're going to pay for it. So if you sit there and discount it, that's why it's so funny. When I first started doing sales strategy, I worked a deal that was paid for performance. Like I was like, hey guys, I won't make money till you make money. And you think like, no brainer, right? But they viewed it as free.
Right.
And it actually de-incentivized them from selling. So the value of something free is nothing. Like you might think, oh, I want to help this person. Like sometimes people have the experience when they're trying to do something pro bono for somebody that their heart just like reaches out for. And the person doesn't take it seriously and doesn't do anything. And it's a waste of everybody's time. Because the value of something free, even if it's valuable, is nothing to the person. So
Well, it's the public
that
school
directly affects
program.
it directly affects how they're going to, what effort they're going to put in, how they're going to treat you, like, and what result they're going to get from it because of the effort they put in.
Totally. One more question here, actually, that I think might kind of help us wrap up nicely. How do you help people get over the dirty salesman complex? Like this just horrible inertia about, I don't want to be a salesperson. And especially those, I mean, and you know this, right? And even when I feel like, oh, I do sales, they're like, oh, you do sales? Like, ew. Like, and it's just like, there's an instant aversion. Like doing sales feels dishonest. It feels sleazy. It feels whatever. What do you say to those kind of people, or how do you help them kind of get over that?
So I have this weird superpower that if people tell me what they do in lots of paragraphs, I can just tell them what they actually do in a sentence. And it's compelling and it gives them confidence. Like, so a lot of times when they're like so scared of being a sleazy salesman, it's because they're not really confident in what they're saying about what they do. So they don't want to push somebody. So when they have the words and the true belief, like, yeah, okay, yeah, this is valuable. And this is why. I was talking to a woman just the other day who does brand messaging, and her whole thing is like, it's a little bit esoteric or elusive to talk about. That it's, the essence of your brand and the voice and the feeling it gives people. And I'm like, you almost need a metaphor for people to understand how powerful this is. That it goes beyond colors and logos. Like, give them 2 rooms. You walk in this one bohemian room, how do you feel? You walk into this one modern room, how do you feel? Do you want to return? Do you want to hang out there? Do you want to tell people to go there? That is the power of the type of branding that you're talking about. And all of a sudden, people understand how valuable that is, and you can confidently stand in value because other people understand what you're saying. So that helps a lot with it. The other thing is, honestly, there's a lot of people who are great at selling and horrible at fulfilling. And we've all experienced it. Someone who is very attentive in the sales process and then completely disappeared. And save people. If you actually care about your clients, save them, show up, empower them with the information about the questions they should be asking other people, the things they want to make sure are included, at least, and understand how to guide someone through the process of making that decision. So sales is really like any other conversation, especially specifically how the black sheep sales method approach, which involves pitch weaving. So like the normal approach to a conversation is question and answer, almost like an interrogation. And then this like extended pitch where one person's talking and then objection. And so instead, you're giving empathy and insight on the person's answers throughout the question discovery part of the conversation. And sometimes people will be like, oh, wait, so you mean like just a regular conversation? And I'm like, yeah. That is what I mean. It's something that you're doing all the time anyway. So like, imagine that your friend comes to you and is like, oh my God, I don't know if I should stay with my significant other. Here's the situation. How are you going to treat that? Like, you're going to get curious. You're going to have empathy. You're going to really be driven by the intention of what is best for my friend. And you're going to hold space for it being both ways, yes or no. And leaving that space makes the other person feel safe in being honest with you and transparent. And it's the same thing in a sales conversation. So like Those three things combined, like having the words that you feel like really represent your value and you feel good about it. Because a lot of people are like, I know I'm valuable, but they don't know how to explain it. And so then they kind of question themselves. Having an approach that is like very conversational and reminding them that they're doing people a disservice. If they actually take care of their clients, they're doing them a disservice by not bringing them in.
I think that is like one of the biggest paradigm shifts that people have to get into any kind of sales is that if you're an honest, good human being, and like you were saying at the beginning, right? If you just care about people, genuinely, I'd even go so far as to say there might be just a smidge of immorality by you not trying to sell them. Because if you don't know who they're going to next, and it might be some sleazeball who actually screws them over or who actually really damages their business or really takes advantage of them. And it's like, if you know you've got a good product, like, what are you doing? You have a moral obligation to fight to try to help that person be successful. And you can't help them until they join your program or do your thing. And so I heartily agree with that. I think that there's like a kind of a moral obligation to say, like, if you've got a great product and you know you can take good care of them, almost how dare you not sell them? Because very likely they'll find someone who's going to screw them over.
They're going to give their money to somebody for sure.
Yeah.
And what are the long-term consequences of that, right? Are they going to quit? Are they going to stop doing their thing because they spent money with someone else and then didn't get what they wanted? Like, are you going to be the catalyst for that?
Yeah.
And also, like, if you are selling based on fit, because some people listening might be like, well, I don't know for sure if my thing is going to work. Like a lot of times when I work with people, they're like, but there's these variables, there's these situations where it doesn't. And I'm like, then just say them. Just say, hey, this is when this doesn't work. When you have this expectation, when you don't have this in place, when I don't have somebody that I can get what I need from, are those you? Oh, then you can feel really confident in saying, yes,
right.
I am going to take care of you and I'm going to get you those results. So if that's what you need to feel really good about that, then definitely integrate that into your conversation, because your conviction is going to sell, and your hesitation of like, I don't want to like overpromise, they can feel that and they don't want to move forward with that.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love that paradigm shift that you're talking about though. Like you're not sleazy. Like you're serving someone, you're solving their problem. And I think that's what I hate is that the con men, as I call it now, whenever someone's like, oh, like salespeople are this and that. And I'm like, oh, those are con men. They promise something and don't deliver it. That's just a con man. Like that's not a salesperson, because a salesperson is a professional problem solver. That's it. It's like, oh, you got something that's not working well. Let's see if we can fix that. And ideally, they're going to be just so happy handing over that credit card, just stoked out of their mind actually, because it's like, oh, thank goodness. This has been horribly stressful. And now my business can actually succeed. And so anyways, just a huge different shift. I hear it all the time though. Oh, I just hate being a salesperson. I hate asking for money. I'm like, as compared to what? Like at a certain point, it's like you're operating out of a state of selfishness almost. You're letting your emotions and your whatever prevent someone from getting the product that they really need that could transform their business or their personal life or just whatever. So
I think don't sell. Everybody hates selling. Fit. Yeah. Understand the person's situation, and if your solution is a fit for them, and if not, give them to someone that is a better fit.
100% agree with that. Yeah. And it's not everyone. Yeah. You're not sitting here just trying to like, put notches on the belt type of thing. It's like that's not the goal. I love that. Yeah. Fit them. I love that.
Yeah.
So Aleasha, for everyone that's trying to kind of, we've gotten some pretty good nuggets here, but for everyone that's trying to figure out all the real framework for how to approach selling in a way that doesn't suck. And I love that. I love that headline. It's my favorite. What's the best way for them to get access to your programs, get your content? How can people learn more about what you're doing?
Yeah. So the best place is Sales is Not a Dirty Word, my podcast. That's the name of it. And specifically listening to the episode about how to sell like a natural. And then I have a lot of solo episodes that you can binge from there that'll really make it clear whether this approach is aligned with you. And if so, then let's do it.
That's awesome.
Work together.
Perfect. And then do you have you have the Black Sheep Sales Program. So first listen to the podcast, and then if they're like, okay, this vibes, then they contact you to get access to the Black Sheep Sales Program. Is that the kind of the path?
Well, we're going to have a conversation, and I want to make sure that I'm a fit for you. So there are situations that are better than others. Like, for example, if you don't have an offer dialed in at all, that's a little harder to work with. Like, you don't even know what you sell and you don't have expertise. Yeah. Like, there are some things that need to be there so that I can feel I have a guarantee that I'll double your investment. So I like to make sure some things are there to make sure that I can honor that guarantee. And I have honored it always since I've had it. And I've never had to honor it. Like, everybody always gets the return. And once we have that conversation, if we move forward, then I just understand everything about your business and I custom design something for you so that it works immediately from the first call instead of a lot of rejections, which is what people usually say to do because they have a sales strategy that's not built for you. It was built for somebody else and somebody else's offer and audience. So that is the thing that is really different about me is it's extremely custom. Like the words and the words you're going to say, the questions you're going to ask, and how to guide the conversation in a way that doesn't feel like you're selling or being a douchebag.
Thank you for listening to another episode. I'm so grateful for your support. If anything on this show was valuable to you, I have one huge ask. That's just share it with your friends. And if you have a little extra time, go ahead and leave me a review. That's my big ask for you guys. We'll see you on the next episode.